Some songs don't just climb the charts, they pull an entire career back from the edge.
Do you believe in life after love?
The music industry is ruthless, and it has a long history of writing off artists who stumbled, aged out, or simply fell quiet. 10 times, one song changed all of that, and the industry had no idea it was coming. If stories about the moments that shaped the music you grew up with interest you, consider subscribing so you never miss a video like this. Number 10. Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do With It? By the early 1980s, most label executives had already decided Tina Turner was a nostalgia act at best. She was in her mid-40s, freshly separated from a painful past, and shopping demos that major labels kept passing on. Capitol Records took a chance, but internally expectations were low. Nobody expected a woman her age to compete on pop radio against artists half her lifetime younger. What came back was a #1 hit in the summer of 1984, her first ever as a solo artist. The song spent 3 weeks at the top of the Billboard Hot 100, won her 3 Grammy Awards, and announced to an industry full of doubters that she was not finished. She was, in fact, just beginning. The album Private Dancer, which housed the single, went on to sell over 20 million copies worldwide. Turner performed at that year's Grammy ceremony in a sequined dress and heels, and the audience gave her a standing ovation before she sang a single note. Rolling Stone had not put her on its cover in years. Within months, she was everywhere. The industry had written a premature ending, and she simply refused to read it. Number 9. Aerosmith, Walk This Way with Run DMC. By 1986, Aerosmith had spent the better part of a decade struggling through addiction, lineup tensions, and dwindling record sales. The band that had ruled arenas in the mid-1970s was barely holding together. When producer Rick Rubin and the hip-hop group Run DMC proposed re-recording their 1975 track Walk This Way as a collaboration, the response from the industry was skepticism. Rock bands didn't do that. Certainly not bands that old. The video aired on MTV and became one of the most watched clips of the year. It introduced Aerosmith to an entirely new generation, bridged 2 genres that radio programmers had kept rigidly separate, and set the stage for one of the most successful comebacks in rock history. Nobody in the industry saw any of that coming. The Run DMC version reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, higher than the original had ever charted. For Aerosmith, it was the spark that led directly to sobriety, a new management deal, and eventually the Permanent Vacation album in 1987, which went triple platinum. Steven Tyler later said in interviews that without that collaboration, the band would likely not have survived the decade. A single re-recording of a 10-year-old song gave 5 men a second life. Number 8. Kenny Rogers, The Gambler.
On a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere, I met up with a...
Kenny Rogers had recorded steadily throughout the 1970s with moderate success, but nothing that cemented a lasting identity. The Gambler changed that the moment it was released in late 1978. The song told a complete story inside 4 minutes, with a character so vivid and quotable that it transcended the country format entirely.
You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when...
Label executives and radio programmers had grown accustomed to treating Rogers as a reliable, if unspectacular, presence. The Gambler made him iconic. It reached number 1 on the country charts, crossed over to pop audiences, and earned him a Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song became so identified with Rogers that it later spawned multiple television films, the first of which aired on CBS in 1980 and drew over 40 million viewers, making it one of the most watched television movies of that year. One song rewrote an entire career narrative.
Every gambler knows the secret to surviving is knowing what to throw away, knowing what to keep.
Number 7. Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive.
First I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live.
Here is the part the industry doesn't advertise. I Will Survive was not the intended hit. Polydor Records released it in late 1978 as the B-side of a record, a throwaway track on the lesser side of the single. Disc jockeys in New York began flipping the record over on their own, and the audience response forced the label to reverse course entirely. The song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the spring of 1979 and eventually won the Grammy for Best Disco Recording. More importantly, it outlasted the disco era entirely, becoming a cultural anthem that still fills dance floors and cinemas and soundtracks, moments of personal triumph decades later. The industry buried it on a B-side. The audience disagreed. When disco collapsed almost overnight following the disco demolition night riot at Comiskey Park in July of 1979, nearly every artist associated with the genre watched their commercial prospects evaporate within months. Gaynor's song survived precisely because it had already stopped being about disco. It had become about something much harder to dismiss. Number 6. Cher, Believe.
Do you believe in life after love?
In 1998, Cher was 52 years old and working with a sound that no one expected from her. Believe arrived with a heavily processed vocal effect on her voice, created using pitch correction software in a way that had never been applied so prominently on a mainstream pop record. Early listening sessions left some label staffers uncertain. It sounded strange. It sounded unlike everything else.
I can feel something inside me say, I really don't think you're strong.
It went to #1 in 23 countries. It became the best-selling single of her entire career and one of the best-selling singles in United Kingdom chart history at that point, moving over 800,000 copies there in its first week alone. The vocal technique she used became so widely copied that producers began calling it the Cher effect. Within 2 years, artists from T-Pain to Daft Punk were applying variations of the same processing across genres that had nothing to do with pop. An industry that had counted her out watched her rewrite the rules of commercial pop at an age when most female artists were considered finished.
I'm too good for you. Oh, do you believe in life after love?
Before we get to the top 5, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. It is always great to see how far this community reaches. Number 5. Carlos Santana, Smooth. Through most of the 1990s, Carlos Santana's recording output had faded from the mainstream almost entirely. His reputation as a guitarist remained unquestioned, but his commercial profile had diminished sharply since his peak years in the early 1970s. Arista Records founder Clive Davis believed in a comeback and assembled a project pairing Santana with a roster of contemporary collaborators. The industry response was polite but unconvinced.
My life to red horse suit your mood.
Smooth, featuring vocalist Rob Thomas, was released in the summer of 1999 and spent 12 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album it came from, Supernatural, eventually won 9 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year. Santana became the oldest artist to hold the #1 position for that many consecutive weeks at that point. The disbelief in the industry was nearly universal before the numbers arrived. Supernatural ultimately sold over 30 million copies globally, and Santana's face appeared on the cover of Time magazine. He was 51 years old. Clive Davis, who had championed the project when almost no one else would, later described the Grammy sweep as one of the most satisfying nights of his career. The guitar had never left. The audience just needed someone to remind them to listen. Number 4. Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl. In the spring of 1981, Rick Springfield was better known for playing a doctor on a daytime television program than for anything he had released musically. He had recorded in the early 1970s without lasting impact, and most industry observers categorized him as an actor who dabbled in music. His label, RCA, had modest expectations for Working Class Dog, the album where Jesse's Girl appeared. The single reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August of 1981 and won the Grammy for Best Male Rock Vocal Performance the following year. It sold in enormous quantities and established Springfield as a legitimate pop rock artist rather than a television personality. The people who had filed him under actor watched him collect the Grammy and quietly reassessed their assumptions. Working Class Dog was certified platinum, and Springfield followed it with 3 more top 10 hits within the next 2 years, a run that would have seemed implausible to anyone who had watched him taking pulse readings on General Hospital just months before. Number 3, Meatloaf. I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that.
Oh, I would do anything for love. Oh, I would do anything.
After Bat Out of Hell became one of the best-selling albums in history in the late 1970s, Meatloaf's career collapsed into years of personal difficulty, vocal problems, and commercial silence. By the early 1990s, he had largely disappeared from mainstream music. The industry consensus, where one existed at all, suggested that he was a one-era phenomenon. I'd do anything for love, but I won't do. That arrived in the fall of 1993 and went to #1 in 28 countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom. It became one of the biggest-selling singles of that entire year globally. The album it led, Bat Out of Hell 2, sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. A career the industry had quietly buried returned at full volume, and nobody had a convincing explanation for why it worked. The single ran nearly 8 minutes in its album version, a length that should have made radio programmers run in the opposite direction. Instead, stations played it anyway. At the 1994 Grammy Awards, he won Best Rock Solo Vocal Performance, accepting the award in front of an industry that had stopped sending him invitations years earlier. Number 2, Bonnie Raitt, I Can't Make You Love Me.
You can make your heart feel.
Bonnie Raitt had recorded and toured for roughly 2 decades before her commercial breakthrough arrived. Her skills as a guitarist and her warmth as a vocalist were respected widely among musicians and critics, but mainstream radio success had eluded her. Capitol Records had actually dropped her from its roster before she recorded Nick of Time, the album that changed everything.
I can't make you love me.
I Can't Make You Love Me, released as a single from her follow-up album Luck of the Draw in 1991, became one of the most covered and most emotionally resonant ballads of the decade. Its stripped-down production, built around a piano and her voice, was almost deliberately unfashionable for the era. Radio programmers who might have passed on something that understated found themselves unable to ignore how deeply it connected with listeners. The song has since become a standard, re-recorded by artists across nearly every genre imaginable, including versions by George Michael, Bon Iver, and Adele, each of whom cited the original as something close to untouchable. The fact that it exists at all is partly a consequence of a label dropping an artist they failed to understand. Number 1, Johnny Cash, Hurt.
I hurt myself today.
In the early 2000s, Johnny Cash was in his 70s and in declining health. Producer Rick Rubin had been recording him in a spare, intimate style for nearly a decade, stripping away everything but the voice and whatever instrument was near. When Cash recorded a cover of Hurt, a song written and originally performed by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, the expectation was that it would resonate quietly with loyal fans. The music video, directed by Mark Romanek and filmed just months before Cash's wife June Carter Cash passed away, became something the industry had no framework for. It aired, and people stopped. Critics called it one of the greatest music videos ever made. Reznor himself said publicly that the song no longer felt like his. Cash received a Grammy nomination and introduced himself to listeners who had never heard a note of country music in their lives. The video cost roughly $600,000 less to produce than the average major label clip of that era, and it rendered nearly all of them invisible by comparison. June Carter Cash died in May of 2003. Johnny Cash died 4 months later in September. The video had been filmed in February, and anyone watching closely could see that both of them already knew. It was not a comeback in the commercial sense. It was something rarer and more lasting. A final statement from a voice that had nothing left to prove and said everything worth saying.